So we are doing a 2nd gen steering kit install. We've got the parts ready and laid out, including the instructions, which are wordy, but we'd really like you to read them. That's why I wrote them. So let's go over real quick what you have. You have a sturdy track bar bracket of a horrible design that uses basically a tie rod end as a track bar end. Everybody knows they wear out quickly. This end of the bracket is narrow but okay. However, it uses a 14mm bolt. We upgrade it to 3/4 and we completely convert this to a standard style bracket that not only holds your track bar correctly, but redesigns the geometry to work with a true crossover style to this knuckle of drag link. This style drag link, which is a T, also stock would have come with a Y, have lots of issues and lots of reasons why they add to bad steering. So any company that uses that T or Y has to try to control that, and basically means they are acknowledging that it's a crappy system that needs extra parts to work good. Why not just get rid of it and make a nice steering to start with? So setup is important. We have it on a lift. Many of you will be on the ground. You need the front of your vehicle to have full weight on the axle when doing this, or you will not know the best place to put the track bar in to center the vehicle. If the axle's hanging at all, it's not accurate. Most of this is about prep and installing the track bar bracket. So one of your first things you're gonna do is remove all of your steering. It's nice to go ahead and get a baseline number of toe before you get started from what you used to have, but not very important either. Okay, so all this stuff can just come right off it. And I'm almost there. We can get it out. Got it. Here's the out with the old and in with the new. So besides regular hand tools and some large wrenches, these are the only specialty items you're really gonna need. Is a piece of wire to fish, a 9/16 drill bit, a 3/4 drill bit, and to save you a bunch of arm jerking, a 3/4 inch reamer really helps for the knuckles and the pivot arm. When you're gonna install all these bars, all of the right-hand threads go on the right-hand side of the vehicle, and the marked left-hand threads go on the left-hand side of the vehicle. Now we have a clean slate, and we are going to do all the drilling that needs to be done. So this is one that's mentioned later in the directions as optional if you need it. But since we have a drill out and everything's out of the way, we're just gonna give it a light reaming to 3/4 right now. So that's got all of our prep done, everything drilled and ready. Now we're gonna go to install the track bar drop bracket, and that is definitely the most time-consuming part of the install, and it's not very hard, it's just a little tedious. Now the tail has to go in first, not the nut first. It's a long slotted hole right underneath the steering U-joint. And it's definitely a little bit of a struggle and a fight to get it in there. All right, so there it sits. All we have to do now is be careful not to move it away from there when installing the bolt. And if you do move it away, with a screwdriver and a magnet, you can put it right back there fairly easily.
It's on the back side?
Yeah. All right. Now that the track bar drop bracket is in place and hanging there by the large 5/8 bolt, it's time to fish this little 1/2 inch bolt into the blind nut that's inside the frame rail. A lot of times the toughest part is what plane the nut is sitting on, not that it's lined up. So just fiddle with it till it goes and it will go.
And we're still lined up.
Okay, so I could hold the bracket if that helps. It's definitely hitting that tail. Now you don't need it tight, so if it bites at all, you'll know. If you get it in one thread, it's good enough. Did it bite?
Yep.
Okay, so now let's back it out enough that you'd be able to put a washer in there. That's probably pretty good right there. So now it's threaded in and it's loose enough to put a spacer in there if we choose or need. And this one is just snugged up, and we'll snug it up just a little bit more, and that will spell out how and where we drill the hole for that bolt. Now, many of these trucks, including this one, have already had a bracket like this put on in the past. We'll see if that helps us or not, but we'll have to work with the bolt hole we need. So it can adjust forward and backward. You're gonna start your adjustment, no matter what your truck is, all the way back and all the way tight to the passenger side. You can secure, but not fully tighten the big 5/8 bolt to hold it there. So back and to the passenger. So now that we have the main bolt that was the old track bar bolt snug, we have the 1/2 inch bolt threaded in, but a gap left to be able to insert a spacer. We can drill this hole. This one's already had one and it's extremely close to where we need it. And it takes a little care to drill from the back, so where you want to start, but in a manner that doesn't make it to where the hole comes out right on the middle of that seam and then your bolt is not sitting on a flat surface. So you want it to be low enough to be away from that weld and angled in a way that goes through the cross member where the bolt isn't on a big angle. It'll be a little bit of an angle, but when you snug it up, it'll all be happy. So that's the last bolt hole you drill, and this 9/16 bolt is the last one that you put in, and it'll be the last one you tighten in the track bar. Since we're dealing with a truck that has stock control arms, we know we're gonna go all the way back for our adjustment and we can tighten things up. Longer drop version of this bracket fits our long travel air suspension. So not only can it be adjusted forward to rear, but by more or less shims in here, you can angle it to the rear of the truck. So it works great for long arms, long control arms, adjustable control arms, or our long travel air suspension.
Got it, it's in.
Walk a fine line and get this thing really tight without bending the blind nut, and then check it later and make sure it's retorqued. Because we've got our adjustment, then this last bolt can be snugged last. A quick break from this install to introduce you to the deep track bar drop bracket. That's for a higher lifted truck. This one's advertised as 7 to 12 inches of lift, but it would definitely work better at a lower height, even down to 5-ish, if you were planning on lifting it in the future. But even then, you know, a flatter track bar is better. But it also would even work above 12 inches. It just depends on what you're doing. You need to test cycle. But the reason I want to show it to you, not only is to introduce you to the bracket, but you can see it has a set of gussets that the one we're showing doesn't have. And this tall lifted bracket needs them, but it's fine to use them on the lower bracket too, especially if you're struggling with holding it still on those somewhat odd factory brackets. Now this one gets installed when your installation and adjustments are 100% complete. You don't do this one ahead of time. However, this one right here is fine to have in place as long as you don't have it so tight that it would affect your ability to adjust this bracket back and forth. So it would help you guide this hole where it would make sense and fit the best, but you would want to have it installed loosely or just use it as a drilling guideline and leave it to the side. Once your bracket's installed, then and your adjustments are complete, then you can put those gussets on. Obviously you have to on this tall lift bracket, but it's a great thing to put on the lower one too, and just make that track bar extra sturdy, and that helps you have a good feel. So we're spending all this time adding grease, but in situations like this, where you have a jam nut against the end of the tube right here, you want to actually remove the grease so you have good friction to hold it. As far as orientation of these bars, all of the right-hand threads go on the right-hand side of the vehicle. The tubes on the left end are marked. All those go on the left-hand side of the vehicle. Of course, the tie rod is the longest. The drag link and track bar are very similar length, but the track bar has a bump out to clear the diff cover with 3 bends. Do not confuse this with the drag link that has just 2 bends. Now on to misalignment placement. Both ends of the tie rod and the axle track end get narrow misalignment spacers. At the other end of the track bar frame end, wide misalignment spacers that are standard. Then you move on to the drag link. Both ends of the drag link get wide with a safety. The safety is the bigger one that flies out in the air, so to speak, and the standard one goes against the metal, whether that be the pitman or the knuckle. Now this truck has had a leveling kit on it with the stock control arms for a lot of years, so there was some memory here, and we absolutely had to use a ratchet strap in order to center this axle. And of course, that's your goal. Get the axle as close to centered as possible, and you can do whatever measuring you need to get it as accurate as possible. However, things are going to get very close over here with our track bar drop bracket, which is meant to get as close as possible because that's how we got the track bar long, and you can see your sway bar end link and sway bar, and also your spring and spring cup, especially with the long travel air suspension, can get close. It's up to you to set this where it misses, even if you're a tiny bit off of center. I'm within about 1/8 of an inch of center, and that's plenty close enough for the alignment to be right and no one to be able to see or notice with the naked eye. Again, remember to be at real ride height with weight on your springs or whatever you've got set up, or you're going to start off with the initial adjustment being wrong. So now with our ratchet strap holding our axle in center, we loosely put a bolt in each end, and that lets us know we have our track bar distance set just right. Now we're going to set the hang of the misalignments in the rod ends so that that bump stays straight out in front of the diff cover. And we're also going to tighten this bolt down when we're done after we retighten the jam nuts in a vise. Now you see there's an adjustment slot there. That's if you're really fine tuning bump steer, but on a coil spring truck, without taking the springs out and making the front axle cycle, you probably won't be able to do that. So just let it go to the bottom, and that's the standard position, and tighten it up. So we're gonna set hang, and then we're gonna go to the vise. Gravity is gonna wanna pull this down. And if we want it to stay right out front where this diff cover has clearance, we have to set that hang with our misalignments. So to do that, we have to set our misalignments and our rod end to achieve that. So Ross is gonna roll this forward where it would hold gravity and lightly lock that down. Then he's gonna roll that rod end forward and then lightly lock down that jam nut. Now that we have our distance and our alignment set, we are gonna take this to the vise and really lock it down because it's very difficult to tighten this later in position. So out it comes, and we're going to the vise with it while not losing the settings. So the track bar and the drag link are gonna require you to back up the jam nut, and to protect your powder, all we do is throw some masking tape on there, and it does a good job. You only have to do it one time. So we're putting on everything we can to make this jam nut tight. Holding a camera sucks. I'm gonna go get a tripod. All right. We need to be able to do a good job at this. So come around here. 1, 2, 3. Oh, that's it. Okay, so we're gonna flip it upside down. Of course, we could do this without the misalignments, but if they got a little grease on them, they actually stick in there.
Yeah.
This is how I bruise myself. Oh yeah. Okay, that'll have it in the truck pretty darn good. So there's the shortest 3/4 bolt, and then the blind nut goes on the back. All is awful nice when doing rod ends. Just to line things up. That got it over that ridge. So here's your blind nut. Put a little grease in those threads. Nothing crazy, but some grease in those threads. Tops over here. You need me to go in or out?
I need it to give my way just a hair. That's what it feels like.
That's what it looks like on my end too. Make it?
Yeah, it started.
You making it?
It's making it. And you're off.
So we threaded that blind nut on the back. Now that bolt can be permanently tightened down, right? We're not taking it back out. And I think I might need your little tapping device for this bolt over here. I'm in fresh powder. Definitely want to be careful tapping bolts in with a hammer so you don't screw the threads that are the most important up right off the get-go. So now we have our axle centered, and it would be a great time to get out the tape measure and check it again.
Thread up.
Yep, so you can go right. No. We want to get toe pretty close to set before we ever do anything with the drag link. So we'll get this bolt snugged up so it holds it where we want to, and we'll get at least one of our jam nuts set to provide our tie rod hang. All of this monkeying around with initial settings should be done with the regular nut, not the nylon lock nut, so you don't have your nylon lock nut threads all wore out by the time you do it. So to set hang, I'm going to bring this up close to level. I'm going to rotate this down, and I'm going to give this a nice little snug. And now we'll measure and see what we really have. Here to do it. You can move that whole thing out of the way. Hit the recording was not recording. Okay, do I have a tape measure?
You did. I was thinking about picking up next time at the hardware, grab it.
So my eyeball and experience with this tape measure lets me pretty much go with a 16th to an 8th, even an 8th, 16th to an 8th of toe. If you're running stock wheels, 0 to a 16th works, but most everybody we're dealing with is dealing with a 12 wide or a 14 wide or a 16 wide. At that point, you need right near an 1/8 of toe. So it could be a short 1/8 and have really good drivability. If you were to spend all your miles on the highway, you might go towards a 16th. If you spent all your miles around town, you might go up towards an 1/8, but that's gonna be drivability, and with wide wheels, you have to get rid of that 0 toe idea that the internet says you need with this truck. Okay, so I will lock these down. So if we do a tiny snug on each side, we do not need to use a wrench to back this tie rod up on powder because these rod ends are rolled down, and if we just do a little bit and go back and forth, this thing will be fully tightened. And once you get back and forth enough to where you know you have it tight, then at that point you can hang on both sides and get that thing really tight. You don't want those coming loose. So with our toe set and our track set, the last thing to do is put in our drag link, and we want to put in our drag link with our wheels pointed straight, and we want to put in our drag link with our steering wheel pointed straight, and we're going to be pretty darn close to having the steering wheel centered. When you take it a test drive, you're going to find out if you're a half thread off or a thread off or something like that. So Ross, we can go ahead and throw in the drag link. If you have any question about your steering box being centered, now's the time to check. Yes, I just checked the wheel was centered, but if we were off, you wouldn't have good right to lock turning. So go right to left, make sure your box is centered, and then straighten your wheel for this last step. So with a short track bar drop bracket that you're looking at, this goes on top, and with the deep track bar drop bracket, like a very tall lifted truck or our air suspension, this goes underneath. But in this instance, we're gonna go on top. So we need to shorten this thing up by at least a 1/2 inch. to see where I'm at first.
Yeah.
We're real close. Let me grab a bolt and I'll check. Yes, now on a second gen, we want the bolt to go up from the bottom because one of the tightest tolerances or clearances on this front suspension is that bolt head to the tie rod. Okay, so we can go ahead and assemble this. If we don't have our steering wheel centered perfect, we're really close. Okay, so now we're gonna set this hang, and you can see that it can flop down anywhere we want it. Again, we're setting the hang with gravity, and that means we're gonna roll this up where we want. We're gonna roll this rod end down. We're gonna bring the jam nut close to snug, and we will take that down, and it's gonna adjust our hang. The other end of the drag link does not need to be in the same orientation. I would have it flat, and that's gonna give you the largest range of misalignment through steering and suspension travel. So that one's gonna be in charge of holding the gravity hang, and this one's just gonna be along for the ride. This is a situation where you're going to need to back up your rod end and or rod to get these tight. Get them snug so it holds it, and then use a pair of wrenches, including even like a 13/16 on this to hold it, and a wrench there to get that snug before you go too far or you'll move the opposite end. And you want them really tight, so you definitely want to put in some serious torque here and hold them where you want and really put it to them. So our steering system is on, and this truck is ready for a test drive. We'll put the steering stabilizer on afterwards, and we'll be switching out these standard nuts for nylon lock nuts after we are sure that our toe is good and our steering wheel center is good. We'll make minor adjustments as needed, and then once that's done, we'll snug up those new nylon lock nuts. But that's not it. After we're done with the nylon lock nut switch, we're going to take multiple test drives, 2 or 3, and each time we're going to snug the jam nuts and the bolts on all of these parts, including the bolts on the track bar drop bracket, and we'll often even snug the pitman arm bolt even if we're not one that had it off, because all those things can work slightly loose and equate to slop in your steering. So a few test drives after everything is done, go for 1 or 10 miles, come back, put a wrench on everything. Okay, so we're pretty much wrapped up here. Things have been tightened. The single stabilizer option has been bolted on, and we are basically finished. So what's left for this system if you owned it and you did not opt for the boots that cover the rod ends is to make sure the bolts are tight, and also to spray a penetrant lubricant on these on a regular basis so that they don't rust or look bad, and can keep them from squeaking or getting gritty or anything like that. Then otherwise, if you're going to drive them in the winter, you must coat them with a layer of grease when we've got the worst weather. At least here in Ohio or states like that where salt or brine are on the road, they're gonna look terrible come spring. If you don't wanna deal with any of that, of course, boots, and the boot kit was your option. So there you have it. The best steering kit as far as geometry is concerned, available for any second gen. Of course, this shows the single stabilizer option, but there is a dual option as well. I'll show you it on a different truck here next to it. That dual steering stabilizer option is available for any one of these versions you pick too. Not only does this show the dual steering stabilizer setup, but this truck also has our deep track bar drop bracket. That is for tall lifted trucks or our long travel air suspension system, and it does what needs to be done to convert this to a taller or longer travel setup. So this should be ready for a test drive. The customer's gonna come and grab it on Friday. He'll bring it back later for more work, but right now, let's see how this thing feels with its new heim joint steering, and I expect it to be pretty good. We have one more adjustment yet, and that's just the center of the steering wheel. Quick start in 12 valve. car just for being here in the driveway. Feels like it's pretty well connected. Now it turns out that I'm sort of hunting for a little bit better feel through this entire test drive. And it wasn't until after that I remembered that this is a 4 1/4 lock-to-lock steering box, not your normal 3 1/3 that either comes on 3rd gens or we switch to on 1st gens. And that's a little bit why I was just trying to find out why this could be a little bit better. Turns out I didn't change anything. It was fantastic. But a 3 1/3 steering box swap would make this thing feel a lot better. And I would have quit fooling around trying to find a better feel. It had it. Good and responsive. Nothing for slop. I'm getting response out of that. If I had to comment on feel, the toe setting is just a touch lazy, which would be probably best for tire wear, very close to 0. If it was towed in just a little bit more, I feel like it'd be a little more responsive, and it might come at the ultimate cost of long-term tire wear, just a little bit, but pretty good. Let's see what happens on this side of the road. Yeah, steering wheel responds almost exactly like it does over here. Pretty good. Pretty good. I know the customer's going to say it's really good. For 2nd gen standards, it's probably fantastic. Hard to know what from the camera you guys can see. I'm feeling in the seat of my pants though, but I've got response out of this. Slow down this time so we don't hit any deer. I don't think I was going to hit any, but now that I know they're here.